I'll cover one here with Review 74, Manual of the Planes, but this time for Dungeons & Dragons 3.x and the D20 system. Alright, so the themes here are a full introduction to the Great Wheel, as well as a toolbox to creating your own cosmology. So, this reminds me of the Manual of the Planes for 1st edition, but far better. My big complaint though, I can't really think of anything with this, because after that last experience with the 1st edition, I have no complaints about this. Like, this is well done. Better organized, colored pages, yes. I know it's an edition thing, but if you can't use the content in this for any edition of D&D, you're not using your imagination. This is a far better layout. The high praise though is that there's content for both players and dungeon masters or game masters, whatever you call yourself nowadays. And there's classes, there's spells, there's class powers, there's all sorts of stuff. And it's just really well done. On to the key points. So, I'm going to go ahead and show you some imagery. And this is something I really love about 3rd edition. Like, the way the introduction pages are kind of like hand-drawn in this rustic art style. Love it. And then you have, once again, on page 7, the schematic design for the cosmology. I love that. I love how everything's kind of connected there. And then right here on page 8, we have the Great Wheel. And excellent use of color, excellent connections. They tell you where everything goes. Unfortunately, they try to introduce this concept of combat in 3 dimensions, and it's like, just do what works for your game, you know what I mean? Like, don't overthink, don't oversimplify it, but have narrative meet the mechanics. Okay, on page 10, they talk about how time works, and they really changed up something that frustrated me about earlier editions of D&D, and that is the time flow. Because time usually works on a consistent basis, but they have the time on erratic time plane versus time on material plane, and there are 5 categories based off a percentile die. I mean, you don't even have to use a percentile die, I feel. I think you could just roll a d10. A 1, and then we have a 2 through 4, and then a 5 through 6, and then a 7, 8, and 9, and then a 10. Like, when you're ending at the 0s and 1s consistently, you could use a d10. Does that make sense? Because ultimately, you're limiting yourself to the same thing. There's a slight variance, but it's not big enough that it will really affect your outcomes. Does that make sense? Yeah. Yes, and then we have the shapes of the planes right there. Alright. There's all sorts of cool stuff like that. Ooh, yes. And then on 14, we have the wild magic effects table, and that is incredible. Like, I love how they brought wild magic back. I love how they really layered it out like they did. And then Connecting the Planes, Chapter 2. They give you a brief overrun of the D&D cosmology, and then they start on the toolkit for building your own with the planar relationships right there. And then they have a section down here, switching cosmologies in midstream on page 18, raising the curtain, revealing your cosmology on 19, and then they give you a sample cosmology, the Omniverse, from 18 to 20, and here's the example of the Omniverse. And I think it would have maybe been better to call this the Manual of Cosmologies, because it's so much more than just planes, and it adds more variety than just planes. I guess that's the best way to say that. You have a new item, the Dimensional Sextant, on page 22. Characters in Magic is chapter 3. Okay. Oh, yes. And on page 21, there's a section on portal keys. And that's really cool, because like certain portals will open under certain circumstances, like a specific time of day or within a lunar cycle or whatever, or a situation like if it's raining, possibly a random command word or a command item. And then on page 24 to 26, you have the Divine Agent. On 26 through 28, you have the Gatecrasher. And then the Planar Champion from 28 to 30. And then the Plane Shifter on 30 through 32. And then from 32 to 33, we have Magic on the Planes. And new spells start on 32. And that goes to 40. And then Random Planar Destinations table on 37. So there's a lot of fun to be had on this, but once again, if you're randomizing it, real early on, like before your adventure starts, say you have a wizard and he's banishing your player characters. Have that pre-planned. Have everything worked out before he does it, because, and you know, you might want to plot string this instead of just rolling randomly, but if you're needing help, the random table is there. Okay, the material plane starts on 41, and it goes to 44. And then it talks about alternate material planes, just like the first edition. And there are some types of material planes, different magic levels, doppelganger material planes, time-shifted material planes, terrain-based material planes based on other cultures, monster-dominant material planes with other pantheons, fantasy geography material planes, and other published campaigns. And divine spellcasting will probably work differently on other material planes, as different deities and demigods are active within those realms. And then there are 4 different ways of reaching alternate planes, like the plane of shadow, shadow portals, demiplanes, or interplanar accidents. The transitive planes is chapter 5, starting on 45 to 64. And then there there's a lot of content over how, yes, there's a lot of content here. There's different stuff. Like the color pools thing doesn't make much sense to me because, like, it should be up to you. I think it's just an example, and it does add something to it, but I'm not sure how I ultimately feel about having specific colors related to specific things, because players with this knowledge are out to abuse it. And I think in some ways it limits Game Master and Dungeon Master flair. When you're like, oh, well, this one's a glowing green doorway, and then they're like, oh, I know what that is. And it almost breaks immersion from the game when players have read or understood even earlier context. Then you have Psychic Storms on page 51. There's tables for that. And then you have Astral Encounters, and that starts on 53. Sorry. And then there's this thing called an Astral Crack, or a Carrick, on 52. It's a type of creature. Yeah, they have some other stuff on here. And then random ethereal curtains for the D&D cosmology. That starts on 57, and then you have that right there. So there's a bunch of content here. And then ethereal cyclones and ethereal encounters on 58. And then there's a new item on 59 called the Ethereal Tapestry. And then an alternative cosmology for the transitive planes on 60. The plane of shadow and alternate cosmologies right there. So to me, the plane of shadow kind of feels like the Flashpoint paradoxes in a way, because if it shifts in a certain way, reality is rearranged, according to my understanding. And maybe it's just because I watched the Flashpoint paradox relatively recently, within the past couple months. And I'm normally not a huge fan of time stuff. Like, Doctor Who didn't really get me until that Peter guy was the Doctor. And, like, I really enjoyed Clara Oswald, too. They were just really well done. That was definitely my favorite Doctor Who, but I didn't really care about Doctor Who because it had so much baggage, I guess, and that's its own thing. Plane of Shadow Encounters on 64. Then you have the Inner Plane starting on 65, and that goes to page 84. And then you have Planes and Opposing Elements and Energy on 66, and three-dimensional models of the inner planes right there. And then there's an option without the inner planes. And then Encounters for the Elemental Plane of Air on 70. And then Special Discoveries on the Elemental Plane of Earth on 72. And then Digging Your Way Out also on 72. And then on 73, we have Elemental Plane of Earth Encounters. And then we have plane of fire encounters on 76. I'm tired of saying elemental plane when I could just say plane because that should be obvious. The plane of water encounters on 80. Negative energy plane encounters on 82. Positive energy plane encounters on 84. And then the outer planes start on 85. And then that goes to 152. Once again, the Great Wheel takes... It's just a great design, I think. Just... It was the first time I really felt that we had a substantive design for what the cosmology looked like, and it didn't feel loose, and it didn't feel psychedelic, man. And then there's an option for the Pantheon that morphs together on 89. There's an option for without the outer planes on 90. East Guard. I don't even know if I'm saying that right. And I feel horrible about that. And then there's table 7-1, uncontrolled limbo on 93. And then controlled limbo on 94. And then there's limbo. Like, such great art. And I don't mind showing it because, there's just really beautiful themes. And then there's Windstorms on Pandemonium on 97. And that's a table. Here's what Pandemonium looks like, at least in 3rd edition. And this book has a lot of beauty to it. This is going to run a bit longer because I want to show you guys why I got into 3rd edition specifically. It was easier to use. It had a great layout. It had color across pages. Now, this felt new. This felt exciting at the time. And it felt established. The rules were relatively easy. It was graspable, and it really captured my imagination like the older books didn't. Like, I knew I was interested in D&D before 3rd edition, but 3rd edition brought with it so much. And for me as a kid, I remember having a black and white TV, and it's not that I was super old, it's just we were broke. And so I seen some Dungeons and Dragons stuff from earlier, but as I got older and I started watching cartoons on a colored TV, and then there was this Advent Guard system that was incredible, and here we are. Sorry, I just wasted time. I'm sorry. So we have the abyssal layers on 101. It's a randomization for those. Oh, here's the abyss. And there's a lot of recycled concepts from the first book, but in very classical sense. Whew, look at how beautiful that is. I mean, wouldn't you just love to go there and climb things? And then this should look familiar from my previous review. But yeah, 3rd edition really introduced a lot of players to this, and I believe that's why Pathfinder took off and 4th edition sank. 80s. Gehenna. I mean, they're wasting a lot less time and effort in this book simply due to art. And there's a lot of things in this book. You have stats for Tiamat on page 118. The 9 hells, look at that. There's that one where I always have trouble with. Acheron. I swear this is Wayne Reynolds. Yep, I got it right. That's Wayne Reynolds art. It has a very signature style to it. On 126, like, the guy is an illustrative genius, and the colors are there. Then you have Mechanus. There's so much stuff to this. And then Arcadia. Celestia. Biotopia. That could mean something different in today's day and age. Elysium. The Beastlands. And the Beastlands kind of reminds me of Overlight. It has a very similar cosmology to it. There's 7 islands floating over one another. Arborea. And then you have Outlands, effects on spells and abilities on 147. Portal Towns and Associated Planes and Abyssal Encounters on 149. The Outlands. Hellish Encounters on 151. Heavenly Encounters on 152. Beatific Encounters on 152 as well. The Demi-Plane starts on 153 and goes to 158. And then you have a random demi-plane generator on 155, and there are several tables for that, so that's really cool. I'm really glad they added aspects like that. Then you have your bestiary going from 159 to 200, and I'm going to try to count monsters. 1, 2, plenty. Plenty. So there are 4 types, 5 types, 6, 7. They said these didn't return. Okay, so one reviewer, okay, there's these guys, and you might remember them from a certain dungeon. There's a positive floaty and a negative floaty, and I really like this art way better than the Zygias and the Zagius from earlier editions, because these don't look like floating nondescript heads. There are plenty of creatures in here though. Genies, demons, Githyanki, Githyrzi, or Murkane. Like, there are para-elementals. I mean, there's a lot of good stuff in here. And then you have half-elementals. And I don't really want to say what pages these are on because they are creatures. And I don't want your players to think that they should prepare for these, because any good encounter is something that the players react to naturally. I mean, unless you're going to foreshadow it as a dungeon master, that is content I would keep secret. And ultimately, Dungeons and Dragons, according to AD&D First Edition, is up to you, the Dungeon Master. And, you know, if players disagree with you, they should be respectful about it according to First Edition's Player's Handbook. Like, they can show their point of view, but they should respect your position. I mean, there are so many cool things in here. Okay, and then on 201 to 221, you have variant planes and cosmologies, including the region of dreams. Oh no, and then you have lucid dreaming on 203. Oh, dream travel is a spell on 202. And then they have how to get to the plane of mirrors on 205. And then spirit world. And then a bunch of other stuff. Like, there's so many cool ideas in this book. And then they have something called the Far Realm that kind of reminds me of like beat Mortal Kombat 11 as Scorpion. And right now, stop what you're doing and go play Mortal Kombat 11 as Scorpion. Beat Chronica and uncover some interesting things. And that's the Far Realm. Yeah, there's a ton of good content in here. And I absolutely recommend this because it's a toolbox, but it's more than a toolbox because it's got little things that help you along the way, and there's images for some creatures, a lot of callbacks to older stuff in this, and 3rd edition is sort of compatible with 5th edition. You do have to put in a little effort. Even if you don't feel like putting in effort, most of the stuff translates. And, like, so when you're transitioning between them, like, design your own planes today. Design your own cosmology today. Don't settle for what they give you out of the box. Even if you're using the Great Wheel, it's way better than what 4th edition presented with the sea of the plains. And I understand they were trying to change it. And sometimes change is good, but not always. And so just design your own plane. Think about how you want it connected. Kind of one out. Please like and subscribe.